Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tech Theory Live, episode number 4. I'm joined here with a panel of guests to talk about the latest tech news and look at the stories behind the tech news. I'm joined today with a couple of my closest friends, starting off with Reza. So, Reza, why don't you give us a little introduction about yourself and tell us what you do?
Sorry, guys. I had the live link in the background for sharing, so that echoed. But welcome, everybody, to Tech Theory, episode 4. My name is Reza Malieri, and I am a geek. As Creighton said, we are good friends, and I've been watching the show. Lots of good stuff coming through Tech Theory, and I'm happy and excited to be here today.
Great, and we're happy to have you here, and I know you have a large technology background, and you do work in IT, so we're happy to have you on to give us your opinions. We're also joined by Will Reynolds-Young, my CFO over at Logic Lounge, and he's here to help with the podcast today. So why don't you give us an introduction about yourself and tell us what you do?
Well, I have Safari crashing, first of all, and I work with Logic Lounge with you, and we have a third partner who will be joining us soon, which we will talk about in the future. I also work full-time at another job in retail, and I have worry-free skincare. So I am all over the place.
We're very happy to have you on, and I know you have a very busy life, and I'm grateful that you could join us today to talk about the technology news this week. And it's been a blast this week watching technology news unfold, and that will bring us into our first story of Apple and Samsung getting together to finally settle their disputes. The CFOs have decided to, not the CFOs, the CEOs have decided to agree to meet, I think it was this last week, to talk about the companies and their battle between who should sell what and who's cloning what and that whole argument. And I don't know, there's just been this gigantic battle between Samsung and Apple of who is the right person, who you shouldn't be able to sell from one store to the next. What do you guys think of this whole Samsung-Apple fiasco?
Will, I'll let you give your point first. Go ahead. What do you think?
Well, I think that Apple and Samsung are never actually going to settle. They're going to keep going round and round forever, because that's just kind of what Apple does. They have a wonderful team of lawyers, and it works for them at this point, so why would they stop doing what they're doing?
Exactly. In the past, we've seen them going back and forth. I mean, this lawsuit and their scuttlebutt has been happening for how long now? Years at least? Not only just of this last, I don't know, it was a Samsung Galaxy Tab that they were going after, one of their phones. I can't keep track of phone names anymore, but one of their phones apparently cloned the iPhone, and they were going after him. And I do agree with you, Will. I don't think they're going to settle anything. I think probably that what we will see is even more outrage from people around this issue.
So, this has been going on for a long time, and we all know that Steve Jobs was really fired up about doing everything he can to, quote-unquote, spend every last penny Apple has to go after people that steal from Apple. But the interesting thing, in my opinion, here is that these guys, even though they're at odds with each other, are constantly working together. I believe Samsung signed one of the biggest contracts with Apple just recently to produce their LCD screens going forward. So they're caught in this catch-22 where each one wants to do something on their own, but they can't because they have to work together, and there's no way out of it, really. I mean, Apple is asking something pretty interesting from Samsung, basically telling them, hey, make us the highest quality products and, supply us with exclusive access to large volumes of your stuff, yet we're going to go after you if you try to use those technologies for yourself. So I think that part of it's interesting. Samsung's making this stuff and saying, okay, well, we've already made this awesome technology. Why don't we go ahead and put it in some of our own products? And Apple is saying, well, no way, you can't use those same things. So my thing would be, if I were Samsung, I would try and use those same products that I'm developing, but don't make it look so close to Apple stuff, which they have done not only in hardware, but as we've seen in pictures of the Galaxy phones, sometimes the software looks similar to iOS as well. So there's a little bit of copycatting going on in there.
Yeah. Do you think it's hard not to copycat, though? Because the iPhone is so successful, even though it's not at the top of its market, and at the beginning, they weren't going to be trying to be the top of the market. But it's become a huge icon that it's kind of hard not to copy them in such a way. Do you think that could be possible there? They kind of have to be somewhat of a copycat because these are the features that people want. And if it's not, and if Apple has exclusive rights over it, they're going to be going to the iPhone and not another phone.
You know what? Some of the things, yes. I mean, there's no way around multi-touch, if you ask me. I mean, once they got that patent, the game was over for that type of manipulation on a touch screen. But when it comes to actual software implementation, like the way that Apple is saying the Galaxy phones look almost identical to the iPhone when you look at the layout, those types of things are avoidable. You just compare it to WebOS. Even though we know that WebOS is all but dead, their entire interface and layout and everything was completely unique. So I think that in certain aspects, like with the multi-touch patent, no, there's no way not to copycat that. But in others, as far as software and interface, you can definitely do something different so you're not, trying to be like Apple all the time.
Yeah, I think there's definitely room there to be unique, yet have some of the same features that people are looking for, and it just takes a little bit more, I guess, time to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Will, what's your take on that part? Do they have to copy Apple all the time, or can they be?
I think in business, the way it works now with the idea that you can buy a patent like multi-touch that skews innovation, and the ability for people to get patents is a little bit ridiculous, and the cost behind them. So, I mean, if they're copying someone, but everyone's copying someone in some point. So.
And the interesting fact about that, Creighton, you probably remember this. Apple bought a company out to get their hands on multi-touch. If I'm not mistaken, that's not something they actually thought up. They bought a company. Too bad we don't have the ability to pop some pictures up, but there was you guys remember the multi-touch trackpad that company was working on. I forget their name, but it was because of, I believe, if I remember the article right, that the inventor was having trouble with arthritis in his hands and hated using a mouse. So he developed multi-touch so he could do gestures. And then Apple pounced on it, bought that intellectual property, and now, you have a point there. If you got the money, you can buy the technology, but it's very expensive.
Exactly, and I think not to skew off too from the subject, but patents in this country are so corrupted. You can have good patents, but then sometimes the patents are so generalized that the single thing that you do could jeopardize what you do because it could be breaking some patent that somebody has. And I know a lot of people have seen patent trolls are all over the place, and they will come after you no matter what you do.
Yep. Agreed.
And I guess if anybody doesn't have any last say on Apple's and Samsung's meeting, I think it's actually going to be kind of, I'll say one more thing before we get off this subject. I think there's a new CEO in town, especially for Apple, Tim Cook. So I don't know if he's going to take after Steve or if he's going to go in his own direction, but I think Tim is trying to take a different aspect of what Apple does in relation to what they do for products and what they do legally. And so it could be different when we finally see what happens with this outcome, and we haven't seen what will happen yet. So enough on that subject, because I know I don't want to stay on Apple too long, or else we'll lose all of our Android fanboys. So, next up, Facebook. Another Facebook story. Last week we talked about Facebook acquiring Instagram. This week we're talking about Facebook adding more features for musicians. Now, if you run a Facebook page and you're a musician, you're always posting your music up out there to get the word out and to share with your fans new music. And this is right out of the book of MySpace. Facebook has now introduced a listen button on musical Facebook pages. So you can now stream the music that people post up to that musician's Facebook page in line with it. And I don't know what you guys think, but I think that's kind of cool. Although it is kind of copying MySpace, I think it's a good step.
It's a great step, but as I read through this article, it's requiring a proprietary application to be authorized, and one would also presume that that means your music has to be hosted on that service. So I don't know how that affects the independent musicians that has really helped on MySpace.
Great point, Will. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, that if you're a musician and you want to make use of that button, if you're not on Spotify or radio or whatever, you're not going to be able to get that exposure. And the drawback is now the other apps that you may have used that didn't require that are now buried within your timeline in a button that requires more digging for users. So kind of bittersweet there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, actually, you don't have to use Spotify because you actually look on it. It does suggest that you use Spotify, but if you click on the listen button, there's two buttons there. There's an open in, actually there's three. Sorry. You can open in Spotify, you can play it in radio, or you can click the I don't have Spotify button and actually will play it in line if you install a JavaScript. It looks like. So I guess it kind of goes both ways. This is probably could be good for Spotify because they're going to gain more listeners. And I'm not going against Spotify. I love Spotify. It's the #1 music platform that I listen to. I think it could help get more exposure, but having a proprietary system, especially something that you have to install, might not be the best for any of the users.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of pros and cons, but overall you can see the trend that Facebook is trying to move into bringing in more media. Back in January they launched the thing where if we're both on Spotify and you're playing a song, I can hit the listen button and we can synchronously be listening to the same song, which is really cool. I want to, if I'm good friends with Will or Creighton and I want to see what they're listening to, it's a good way to discover music. And like you were saying, kind of brings in some things that we're used to from MySpace. So the other part of the article was that they're going to bring in other media like movies and things of that nature. So I could see that being really cool as well. Give us like an advanced preview of something, get us excited. Friends are spreading it. It's going viral. So there's more and more ways to draw us into more media. So overall, I like it more than I think it's going to be a bad thing.
Yeah,
definitely. Sorry.
Go ahead.
It's definitely a step in the right direction, but I think there's a lot to be desired with the feature. I was looking through the band page that I managed, and I didn't see any options, so I don't know that it's rolled out to small bands yet.
Yeah, definitely. And in some ways, I mean, if you do kind of have to partner up with Spotify. And kind of license your music out, and that could be good. I mean, because it does get you out there into a highly used space of people constantly listening to music. I think Facebook has put their push behind Spotify, and it could become a huge platform. It is becoming a huge platform for a lot of people because it does more than what Pandora could do. And it does more than, I think, any of the music services out there could do, because you can make playlists, you can share them with people, you can watch, or you can have custom playlists, share them. It's just a whole tons of features packed into this application, and that's good. I think it's good. I'm a huge fan of Spotify, and I don't know if there's people who are against Spotify out there. These days, you kind of do need to have a big pushing force behind what you do to be able to get exposure. And if you're partnered up with someone like Spotify or radio or something like that, you can definitely get your music out there than just running a Facebook fan page or trying to do it yourself.
Yeah, so the distribution is going to be a good thing for musicians, and the good news is there are alternatives. So if people don't want to use it, there is still the different tabs with the different apps that they can use. But you're totally on the money there, Creighton. The more exposure, the better. More people find your music. Sure, the royalties are small, but you still end up making something. And
you got to start small. It's basically you just got to start small. And if you partner with some big people, then you can definitely get up there and get more exposure. So I don't know if anybody has any last thoughts on that. Yes, no? Maybe so, I don't know.
Just one thing I read quickly in the comments that I didn't even think of is Spotify actually isn't available in a bunch of areas. I think it's just, United States and
UK.
UK?
But they're trying to roll it out. And that's also another one of the huge things out there is that licensing music is very tough, especially for the music industry, because they want to squeeze as much money as they can out of there. So they're very careful with licensing agreements. And I think that's one of the big things that's keeping Spotify back from going worldwide. So moving on,
R.I.P. MySpace.
Apparently it's still live and it's coming back, but I don't know.
Sorry, Justin.
I haven't.
That wasn't a good investment.
Yeah. All right. So I love Verizon. I have a Verizon iPad. I have a Verizon iPhone. And I have the iPad 3, and it has 4G LTE. Now, there was a new, I don't know if it was a study or just a statement by Verizon, but their 4G LTE now covers 2/3 of the U.S. population. That's a lot for 4G.
You know what? That is really good, and we all know that Verizon's been ahead of the ball. By the way, shameless plug, here is my 4G Verizon LTE iPad with my lovely JailbreakCon carbon fiber skin from iCarbons.com. But anyway, my 4G LTE Verizon iPad has never picked up an LTE signal. Now, I was having a discussion with Creighton about this earlier, thinking maybe I have a dud or maybe I did something to it. But it seems like the rest of the country is getting some great coverage, which is going to be awesome because high speed on your mobile device is just out of this world fast.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yep, I did do speed tests. I live out here in the boonies. I mean, if I live in this centralized city, and because I go to college, and anything in a 10-mile radius around me is farmland, and I'm surprised that 4G LTE is available around here, and I'm getting like 30 megabits per second, megabits. Don't correct me. I know I probably said one of them wrong, but it's available out here, and it's fast. And I'm surprised that you're not getting service, and you're in a more populated area than I am.
I'm in the heart of Seattle. I'm like maybe 20 minutes outside of Seattle.
So
well, I mean, I haven't had any chance to really use LTE. I have a nice original iPad here with AT&T 3G, which isn't activated, and I have my Verizon iPhone, which I love.
The original iPad, Will?
The original iPad.
I got one.
I have two original iPads. The other one's sitting over on the other side of the room.
Yeah, so I mean, Creighton, that's faster than Comcast at my house. Just to put it in perspective for people, why they'd want to get 4G LTE on their device, it can be at times faster than your home internet.
Definitely.
And you can have that in your pocket.
Comcast.
Yeah, and so if you're looking at it, I mean, Verizon's making a huge push for 4G, and they're constantly expanding. And so we could, do you think we'll see the death of 3G phones, and do you think we'll see an uprise of people buying mobile dongles for internet use instead of getting a cable internet connection like Comcast?
That's an easy answer. I would say no to your last question, only because the caps on data from home internet versus those mobile dongles are night and day. I can't remember what Comcast cap is, but it's something like crazy. Like, what is it?
250 gigs.
Yeah, and there's no way on earth you would get that on a mobile dongle. If we could, I'm sure all of us would throw away our home internet. Yeah, right now I'm getting that 250 gigs from Comcast for $30 a month. In comparison, Verizon wants to charge me $80 a month for 10 gigabytes. So there's a massive disparity there between mobile broadband and home broadband, and I don't think we'll ever see, unless the prices, sway drastically towards the mobile side. A lot of us giving up, our primary home internet for that. But yeah, I'd love to see more 4G. I don't think 3G is going to die quite yet because, especially, but you said you're in a rural area, but across America, I don't think that's the norm. There's still, more 3G and 2G edge than there is 4G LTE. And there's this huge debate about what is and isn't 4G. So.
Yeah, exactly, because there's been stories, especially in Australia, that 4G, they don't really support 4G down there yet, and there's a huge court system going against Apple with that 4G name because it's not really 4G, yet they're still naming it as 4G.
I kind of wonder, there hasn't been that many LTE devices sold, and I'd like to see how the network is affected as we get more people streaming video, because 4G is highly promoted by all of the companies, not just Verizon, to be for streaming video such as Netflix. And when you're streaming Netflix on your phone, you're using up a lot of bandwidth. So I also think it's kind of hypocritical in the sense where they're giving you only 2 gigs at the bottom. So.
Yeah, I think when the iPhone apparently, and I'm going off of rumors here, so don't. I'm not saying I'm right or anything, but supposedly the iPhone 5 will have 4G. So I think that will really be the big stress test for 4G is when the iPhone 5 gets released and people start activating and using their iPhones.
Yeah. Will made a great point too. They want to push us to the 4G. Everyone's hyping it up with their marketing. They want everyone moving over to it because now they have data caps in place, and we, just covered the expensive, how expensive they are. And with the increased speed, they're like, oh, here's this awesome, fast new network, and it's great for things like watching movies. But by the way, we're only going to give you a little bit of it, and it's going to run out really fast, and we're going to make way more money. That's what this is really all about. Yeah, it's awesome that we're going to be able to do things faster, but it's going to suck that we're going to only be able to use a little bit of it and then have to pay more and more and more. I personally happened to get a throttling message from AT&T yesterday. I have apparently a grandfathered unlimited plan from AT&T, which is not so unlimited. I didn't think I was ever going to get it, but I got the message yesterday. Once you hit a 3 gigabyte amount of data used, they start throttling your speed down. So, if I'm able to hit 3 gigabytes on a 3G network, imagine how we're going to hit those caps on 4G. So I think it's going to be interesting to watch how consumers react because we're already paying so much for the services. Maybe we'll start reducing our consumption of data on the go just to make up
exactly. And when I first got my iPad 3, I got the Verizon version, and I didn't think I was going to use a lot of data, so I bought the 1 gig plan for the first month just to test it out and see how it was. Within the first 2 days, I used 3/4 of that 1 gig.
Wow.
In the first 3 days.
Were you doing anything special other than regular?
No, I was just I was surfing around sometimes, and I was just playing some games. I think I only downloaded maybe 1 or 2 games off of 4G, but I was just playing them, and I let stuff sync.
Wow. That's pretty fast.
Yeah, and back to your point when you were talking about caps and speeds, cellular data plans are very expensive compared to cable plans. Because I'm looking at it right now, a 1 gig data plan for only 1 gigabyte is $20 a month, and 2 gigs is $30, 5 is $50, and 10 is $80. That's a lot for just that much of space, especially for mobile. Where what are you paying? $30 a month for a 250 gig cap. So I think mobile browsing still has a limit on it, but I don't see it expanding soon.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people that I talk to in the IT field, especially people that are extremely advanced in their use of IT, say that eventually internet is going to become a commodity, just like everything else. You need water, you need electricity. You're going to need internet in the future, and so there's going to have to be some point in the future where these carriers can't expect to make these outrageous amounts of money. The price is going to have to drop because it's going to become commoditized. So.
Yep. Looking in the comments, there's just one comment on the CNET article. If HSPA Plus is 4G, then why is Verizon pushing LTE? That's one of the big things, because there's a difference there. There's 4G, then there's LTE, and I don't think most people know the difference. And AT&T and T-Mobile are over in this one space, and Verizon is over in this other space. And it's kind of been like that for a while now, because T-Mobile and AT&T are GSM, while Verizon is crap. What are they?
CDMA.
CDMA. Thank you. I so many letters, and I can't keep track of them all. But I think
let's save that for the one we have coming up. That's a good one.
Yeah, I think this kind of will segue right into Verizon, this other Verizon article talking about shared data plans. Apparently, sometime this midsummer, Verizon is going to roll out shared data plans. And I know for me, I have a data plan, my mom has a data plan, my dad has a data plan, and we're all paying separate charges for that data plan. And I may use a lot of data, but then they may not use a lot of data. So having a shared data plan might be good, because you can get like a 5 gigabyte shared data plan and pay less. But there could be rebounds to that as well. What do you think of Verizon coming out with these shared data plans?
I think it's great, Creighton. I'm in the same boat with you. You know, I have 5 iPhones on my family plan, and the lightest users are my mom and my dad. My dad virtually never uses any, and neither does my mom, yet they're both roped into these minimum dollar amounts for these ridiculous amounts of data. It's like $15 for 250 megabytes or something stupid. You know, what's the point? We could put that same $15, you know, so say for 2 people, my mom and my dad, that's $30 for 500 megabytes of data that they're paying for that they're not even using. So we can take that same $30 and put it into a big pool and get a much bigger amount of data. You know, it'll benefit the rest of the users. And so all around, I'm all for shared plans. I can't wait to see what the pricing is going to look like, but which we don't have any information about, right?
Yeah, there's no information yet. There's only one single screenshot here, and you guys can go look at the Engadget article on it, of the plans for a shared data plan. And I think for me personally, I think I'm on the edge for a shared data plan, because I'm a person, apparently, last weekend, I went from a 2 gigabyte data plan to an unlimited data plan for $20 a month from some weird special that Verizon was having. So I think for me now, I don't think I want to have a shared data plan now, because I am now on an unlimited plan. So for some people who don't, maybe the new users or the people who aren't on these grandfathered unlimited plans, that might be pretty good for them to get into this shared data plan.
Knowing that that rug could be pulled out from under you at any moment, I've had 2 separate carriers change 2 unlimited plans on me within the last year. I had a WiMAX hotspot from Sprint, which they call their 4G technology. I had unlimited data, and they reduced that down to 5 gigabytes. And then AT&T, of course, had me grandfathered with my iPhone's unlimited plan, which I've had since 2007 with the original iPhone. And I just got a message that I'm capped at 3 gigabytes now. So just as easily as you can go from some magical way go from 2 gigabytes to unlimited, you could easily
take it right back down.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I have zero faith in the carrier's unlimited moniker. Even with Sprint saying that they're going to be unlimited forever.
That is the gigantic issue. They might say unlimited, but it's not unlimited. There's going to be some sort of restriction, and people get outraged about this, because the bottom line is they don't read the terms of service. Mm-hmm. And in all honesty, those terms of services are way too long to read.
Yeah. And they can change them, as we've seen with AT&T throttling, and now Sprint reducing their mobile cards from unlimited. I'd rather have something where I know exactly what I have. They just come out and say, okay, your family has 10 gigabytes of data for the month. Boom, there's your $80, there's 10 gigs, everybody go crazy. Whereas, my AT&T Unlimited is really 3 gigabytes, which is really horrible. And I'm considering maybe taking them to court like that one guy who got a big check.
I worry that as we get better devices with our wonderful new iPad screen, that the amount of data that these wonderful new devices is going to use is exponentially greater.
Well, if you do see with the introduction of with the introduction of the iPhone and all these 3G phones, I'm sure if you look at a graph, you just see data just skyrocket up. And now with 4G, it's faster. It's even skyrocketing higher. So it's this thing of everybody's increasing their amount of data consumption because of the increased speeds and the increased way that they can get this information faster and quicker. Because everybody knows 4G is like 30 times faster than 4G, and you can take all that data down very quickly.
So, shared family plans hopefully will help us a little bit with that. The carriers are real good at their marketing, and they don't usually present anything to customers if there isn't a tangible benefit in it. So I'm excited to see. I've got my customer hat on, and it says WIFM on it. What's in it for me? Show us, Verizon. We want to see.
Yeah, and I think it'll be amazing for those small families or for those families who might have phones. They don't want to use a whole lot of data, but their phones might require a data plan. Like my iPhone, it requires a data plan. So having a shared data plan through all those phones, you can pay like the minimal amount without having to get a data plan for every single person in your family. So I think that'll work out very well, especially for Verizon. And I think they might see more people transferring over to Verizon from, say, AT&T because they have access to this feature, to this account.
I'm on my way out, so I'm excited to see what's next.
Yep.
I know that I would have liked to have had a shared data plan because I just purchased an iPad, and the shared data plan instead of paying for the tethering on my iPhone, which would have been a much better option.
Yep. And moving into our last iPad article, because I don't want to bore you guys with lots of iPad articles and Apple articles. It's basically just a continuation of the Apple versus Australia huge fiasco because, as I talked about before, Australia's their cellular doesn't really support 4G, and so when they come out with this iPad with 4G, it sent people in Australia into an uprising because they don't have 4G, and so there was a huge confusion of wait, so we have 4G now? Because they don't. They still don't. And so there's this huge lawsuit going down to kind of get the 4G taken out of the iPad's name. What do you guys think with this 4G, Australia with the 4G in the name of the iPad and what have you?
From what I saw from it, their marketing, legal marketing department was mad at it because they're saying that even though they labeled it as 4G, it runs on frequencies that are not compatible with Australia's 4G network. Australia supposedly either is in the process of making an LTE network or they have an LTE network, but it runs on a different frequency than the ones that are within our iPads.
Well, if here in the article, they do say 4G runs on at least the third generation iPad runs on the frequencies of 700 megahertz and 2100 megahertz. Now, currently, Australia's 3 telecoms, their cellular providers, run on the 2100 megahertz band. So the 4G is there because it uses the same band that it runs on, but they market it as 3G because they don't yet, I believe they don't yet have the capacity to flip the switch for a LTE network. So I think they're still building it up, and this is a little bit pre-released.
Yeah, it comes down to, I think it's just bickering about labeling, if you ask me. If the technical specifications are within the device, but Australian government is saying don't put that sticker on your box because you're misleading our people. And Apple is being lazy, in my opinion, to argue that point. Yeah, don't confuse the Australian people. Change your packaging. But, manufacturing costs are significant, and they're a company that is all performance-based, so maybe even retooling the line just for one specific country would not only increase their costs, but it would start a trend that maybe different companies would require them or push them to do that, and now you have tons of new costs because Dubai wants a different label, Germany wants a different label, Spain, so
Everybody wants to be customized, basically.
yeah, so there's a little bit of cost involved and a little bit of them being worried about setting a precedent for, in the international markets, for instead of them being able to produce one product, they might have to produce, tens of different products. So
you have to remember now, I mean, suppliers and companies have been adopting to China's policies to be in their area for the longest time, and we can only expect that to happen now. I personally think that the idea of having an iPhone 4 or 4S is misleading to the average consumer anyway, because constantly my dad tells me that he has 4G on his phone, and obviously he doesn't. So it doesn't even matter to the average consumer. It's just a legal battle happening in court that
exactly, and I think that's basically the bottom line right there. It's just a naming scheme. I think it all is, especially with the 4 and 4S. It's kind of similar to that. I mean, 4S. All right. So next article. Don't open up the article yet. I want to ask you all, even the people in here, panelists, people watching. When I say this name, tell me what you think. Windows RT. What do you think that means?
Retarded?
That's not appropriate language.
Yeah.
I already read it, so I already know what it means. Runtime is what it is. But
yeah. So it's named Windows Runtime, and it's basically that's the Windows version. That's what they're calling it. Windows RT is the Windows version for Windows 8 that will be running on the iPad, or not the iPad. I'm sorry. ARM-based devices, ARM-based devices. So this is like tablets and anything that runs with an ARM chip, and because it's going to be customized specifically for it. Back at, get the name of it. It's the big convention held every January.
CES?
CES, there you go. I'm losing my mind today. But at CES, we saw Microsoft show off all their ARM devices. So there is going to be a huge market there for Windows with ARM devices. Now, we're talking about the name here, but I do also want to talk about Windows 8 and what it means for different devices. But do you think Windows RT is really that good of a name for something?
Let me just clarify, retarded can have many different contexts, and I meant that in a sense of, not mental capacity for anyone who may have gotten offended. That maybe I just want to clarify that. But it's just another one of those weird, random things that Microsoft does. I mean, you would never know what RT is, and I think that's the point of what you did there, is not having us read it and try to figure out what it is. So it's like a technical specification that has to do with the way Microsoft does things for developers, and it doesn't make any sense to me. Consumers are never going to figure out what RT means. They should have just called it like, Windows Mobile Tablet or something that's easier to figure out what it is. But yeah.
As we've seen in the past, Windows has some crazy naming schemes for things. And if you look at like Windows 7 or Windows Vista, there's like 8 different versions. Windows Professional, Windows Home, Windows Home Premium, Windows Tablet, Windows Embedded, Windows... Too many Windows.
Yeah. I mean, in contrast with what Apple does, Apple is all about simplicity. It's iOS, and that's it. You've got all these different flavors. But then again, they do make the distinction between iOS and OS X. Even though they're cross-pollinating some functionality, it's still, it's either the desktop or it's the mobile. Windows has the desktop, vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, all these different flavors, and now this RT thing. So they need to work on their scheme, but like you said, it's going to be a huge move to have full-on Windows running on a tablet device. Guys, in case you didn't know, we're not talking about like a pulled back version of Windows, right? It should be full Windows on ARM, give or take a few small differences.
That's my biggest problem with tablets.
So we're going to get full Windows 8, right?
Yep, Windows 8 I think is going to be the best for tablets, and that's what I keep saying. Windows 8 is great for tablets. Their Metro interface is great for touch screens. Now, when I reviewed it, and I reviewed it on a desktop base, it was hard to move around, especially in Metro. And it looks like Windows is really pushing Metro. And I don't know what you guys think about Metro at all, but I'm not a big fan.
I mean, I could never be a big fan of change. It's not that I use Windows constantly anyway, but at least they're going in the right step of direction with not having 87,432 different versions, and I believe that is the actual number. I counted while we were waiting.
Wow.
But I don't think that you're going to be able to get the save interface for a very long time on a tablet versus a desktop computer, and it's mostly because of you're interacting with a mouse and a pointer versus your finger, and I am not going to use a touchscreen as my main computer.
I don't think you better.
Isn't that some of the kind of appeal to what they're trying to do with Windows 8 on ARM, is to give you the same power as you would on a full desktop? I think it's just not working in the reverse direction, is when they try to implement the tablet features on the desktop. But I've spoken to a lot of people who want Windows 8 tablet specifically because they can do almost everything they can do on their PC or desktop.
And I think Windows can definitely bring the full desktop interface to a tablet, but just the way that they're doing it right now is probably not the best for them.
The Metro UI?
With the Metro UI is great on a tablet, not very good on a desktop. I'm not a big fan of their desktop. And I'm also not a big fan of losing that start menu. Love that start menu.
That start menu has been there for a very long time, which is another fundamental difference in the problems with upgrading operating systems with me. But I don't think that you're able to get the full desktop interface with the current iteration of Windows 8 because of you can't have the x86 emulation because of the ARM chip.
Okay.
It was coded specifically for ARM.
That's where the confusion came in for me, because I knew that there was going to be full implementation, but maybe it's only because they have two flavors of tablets, if I'm not mistaken. The x86 tablets and then the ARM tablets, right?
Correct.
So the ARM is definitely not going to have the full. Is that what you read, Will? It's not going to have full Windows?
Yeah, I don't. Even if it was full Windows, just like I was going on a spree of tweets yesterday, they're doing it wrong. At least they're trying to do it right with a fluid interface between desktop and mobile, and that's what needs to happen. They're still doing it wrong because they're creating a touchscreen interface for a desktop computer.
So in the great words of Steve Jobs, you're doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong.
Or you're holding it wrong, or whatever he said. But
you're holding it wrong, but that's all right.
I think they're trying to do too much right now, especially they're going in the right direction. I will agree with that. They're looking more towards tablets because I'm not saying that I'm not a big fan of change. I love change, but I think the way that they're going right now isn't the way that they should be going. And I'm a huge fan of tablets. I mean, I have my iPad here, and I use it all the time. I use it when I'm not at my computer, and it's a whole lot easier to carry around a light 1.5-pound tablet instead of a huge 5-7-pound laptop. And it can do a lot of the same features. I think, though, that Microsoft isn't doing it right when it comes to bringing Windows 8 onto the tablet and vice versa. They need to have two separate versions customized separately. Mm-hmm. They can't have this same. They can't try to make it a universal operating system. They can't do it.
One size does not fit all. We all know that.
Especially with computers, one size does not fit all. So. And I think that's a huge thing that's kind of holding them back.
I think that I can have the side interface with my MacBook Air, and that's what I'll stick with when it comes to a tablet. My only use for the iPad, like I said, in a group that Creighton and I belong to, Nomies, is that I use it for business, and it is an amazing cash register for my business. But beyond that, it is proof my draw something game, and that's about it.
Exactly. And everybody has different uses for tablets as well. So moving on, so we don't stay too long on the iPad and Windows 8 and everything. If you guys use Gmail, and I hope all you guys use Gmail, especially if you're watching us right now, because you're probably logged into your YouTube account, which is probably connected to a Google account, which probably also has a Gmail account connected, or you're watching us on Google Plus, and you have your Gmail account connected, because you have to have a Gmail, whatever.
Google account. Google account.
You have a Google
it's
account.
the whole universal thing going on now.
There is an application out there, a service, that can help you look at your data on Gmail. And if you use Gmail for sending emails, this actually might be cool information for you to look at. It's I don't know, it looks like a Google Doc that is a script that accesses what you use your Gmail account for and tells you what you've done. And it gives you statistics like how many conversations you've had with people, how many emails you've received, and how many that you've sent. And it unlocks a lot of this user data that you might not have known before, especially if you're a heavy user of Gmail and you want to know, like, you know, what's all those features. And I don't know, have you guys used Gmail a lot?
Yeah, I use Gmail exclusively for my email. Google basically owns every part of my life. We're looking at the show notes in Google Docs. We're on Google Plus. We're YouTube partners. Now everybody's a YouTube partner. So Google is going to be taking over our lives, whether we like it or not. I'm sure none of you have searched Ask Jeeves lately when you need something. You go to Google. So definitely using Google is huge for everyone, but now to be able to get some stats on your use is pretty cool.
I think it unlocks a lot of data to let you know exactly what you're using it for.
That's a primary concern of mine. I use Gmail almost exclusively. I don't use it completely exclusively because the companies, other companies that I work for do not use it. But I use it as much as I can. Is that I'm dependent on Google for my email, and as many people have found out with their AdSense account or partner account, it can just be revoked and never come back. So I don't see why we can't see that happening in the future just with Gmail accounts and Google Apps accounts.
Yep, I do use Google Apps and I do use Gmail accounts. I'm a huge Google fanboy, if you want to say for much, but I think it's interesting to see how you really use your online account, especially at Google, because I don't think people actually realize what they use their account for and what the statistics might look like. I think that's one of the big things right there, is that they just don't know.
And it's important to note that this particular method is not an actual Google thing. It's a script that was written by one of their developers. So it'd be nice to see Google themselves put out more access to stats for us, as far as, you know, our YouTube stats, different stats on apps. I mean, they give great analytics for how other people are watching your YouTube channel, but not necessarily how you use YouTube. It's just a small example of some things that would be nice to see from Google as far as how we use stuff. But yeah, I just want to point out that this particular thing is not actually made by Google, the company, right?
Exactly. And I think Google looks to have actually taken an interest in this script, and who knows, we might see it be a part of your settings somewhere that you can click on your analytics for Gmail, and this information could be shown.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, definitely.
I think this is a good segue into another Google article that we have. A Russian search engine, Yandex, Y-A-N-D-E-X, is basically calling out Google for their ethics, especially compared to their rivals. They claim that they basically shut out their rivals with their tactics to stay the #1 search engine. They actively attack their rivals and people that they're against.
I find that funny. If I'm not mistaken, the primary argument in this article was that Google chooses to put their own search engine in their browser, and it's all about the browser. And, you know, if you or me were starting our company and, you know, we put our own thing in our own product, I wouldn't feel bad about that. I mean, Chrome is theirs, and they have the right to, offer whatever features they want. People are not forced to use Chrome. They can use Safari or IE or Firefox, and so the argument there that they're like trying to cut people out because they put Google as the search engine in Chrome, I didn't find held much water.
Well, do you think that they're so big that they kind of have an obligation to do it because they're huge? I mean, everybody knows who Google is. Do you think they have an obligation to do something about that because they're so widely looked after and looked at and used that they kind of have some obligation to offer up other options?
Well, I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't think a free market enterprise ever should be forced to do anything. Just like we don't want people to monopolize, we shouldn't, tell them what they should and shouldn't do with what they build. So I personally don't think they're obligated. I think if they want to be classy about it and say, here, go ahead and use Bing if you want, that would be nice, but they certainly shouldn't be forced to do that, if you ask me.
Well, and the bottom line, too, is that you have the ability to choose what you want. They're not forcing you to use Google at all. You can go and use Microsoft, you can use Bing, and you can use Internet Explorer, and you can totally not be a part of Google+. But if you look at everything else out there, if you look at Firefox, if you look at Google Chrome, even if you look at Opera, they all use Google as their default search engine.
And Facebook, if we were to say, okay, Google, you have to offer other search engines, we'd have to go to Facebook and say you have to let other search algorithms within your search box. It's kind of an area that we probably don't want to start getting into because there's way more applications to that. If we start saying everyone's cutting everyone out because they're promoting themselves, it's generally not a good way to go about things, if you ask me. Did you guys find any other points to the argument besides the browser thing within that article, or did I miss something?
I think it was largely around their browser, and I'm using Google Chrome right now to view the show notes and view this article. I love Google Chrome. I love the features that are built into Google, and I can use Google. And so I'm kind of on the fence of, well, I like what they do, yet in some ways I'd like to see some sort of customization in there to maybe change your search engine or use another search engine when you're trying to search for something. But again, it also comes down to you're using Google Chrome. It's a Google product.
Yep.
Why would they use let's say Yahoo search or Bing search over their own search in their own product?
Absolutely. I mean, we made a conscious choice to install Chrome and use it, so we're not
at the same point, Internet Explorer, you can change the default search engine, but also I was using Safari at the beginning of this broadcast, and it kept crashing with the broadcast. So I switched over to Google Chrome, and it's been fine the entire time. But I think that whenever you're a large company, and I say large lightly because they are a massive company, it's pretty hard to be viewed in the public's eyes everywhere as ethical. And I think that Google has been fairly ethical in their dealings in comparison to someone like even, say, Microsoft or Apple.
Yeah, to the amount possible, guys. I think, fundamentally we're talking about ethics in corporations. Business and ethics are two things that naturally don't really go together. I mean, if the bottom line is for you to make money, you're not going to, unless you're a nonprofit, you're not going to, be super, super, super concerned with ethics. I mean, yeah, Google's motto is don't be evil, but there has been times where we've caught them in hypocritical situations. Because that's the fundamental nature of business. If you don't want to step on toes, if you don't want to have to choose sides, be a nonprofit. But if you're in business to make money, it's the root of all evil. We all know that. So it's kind of a tough thing.
It is a huge thing for them. And when you're talking about being hypocritical, that reminds me of with their recent Panda updates. I know this is kind of getting off topic, but it's an example of them stepping kind of on their own toes when talking about ethics. They had their Panda update, And this changed a lot of people SEO-wise. And one of the biggest hits was if you had a subdomain. So if you had like blog.logiclounge.com, let's put that out there, you would actually be penalized for hosting a website on a subdomain. And your results wouldn't come up as far up as if you had a root domain. Yet if you look at any of Google's products, they're all run on subdomain. There's plus.google.com, there's docs.google.com. All of their Google applications are run on these subdomains, and if you search for any of these in Google, they're going to be the first results when you search for them, just purely for the fact that the Google pushes up their own results, I think, to kind of promote their own products. And so they're kind of stepping on their own words there when it's like, don't have subdomains, have your own unique domain, but yet you're kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah,
I wanted to put that out there.
A huge example of that was also the fact that we all know Google ran out of China for censorship, right, guys? What are they, based in Hong Kong now? They moved their China office or shut it down because they got sick and tired of the government censoring them. Yet, during that same time, they started a new thing where they would censor results for torrents. None of us condone piracy, but it's the fundamental point of it. If you don't like censoring, why are you censoring? So there was a big stink about that. It was quite a while ago, but I'm sure you guys remember reading about it. They took and basically forgot about their China operations, and yet things were surfacing that they were censoring search results themselves. So,
and I think a form of their censoring too is also their search plus your world. I think that's a form of censorship from Google, because it's filtering search results based on your circles that you might have circled. And I don't know about you guys, but do you guys think that's a form of censorship from Google?
Relevancy is nice. I mean, I'm sure we kind of would all like that, but if we don't get a choice, we really can't decide. So yeah, someone's spoon-feeding us, and we don't get a choice about it. So yeah, it could be seen as censorship, if you ask me.
Yeah, and you can turn it off too, but again, you're still getting personalized results. And then but then I want to put this out there though. You're using Google, so you really can't argue because you're choosing to use Google. If you don't want personalized results, go use another search engine.
Yeah, and business interests and moral interests are almost never going to align. So, that's just going to be tough for anybody who's complaining about fairness. If they're in business, they need to take it with a grain of salt and realize that they have choice. If you don't like the way that somebody does business, then you should take your business elsewhere.
Exactly.
That's my opinion.
And I think we should move into our last article because we're coming up on our time limit here. Let's talk about social networks and using social media where you should use it. Because the big question, because there's tons of social media sites out there. There's Google+, there's YouTube, there's Twitter, there's LinkedIn, there's Pinterest, there's tons. There's MySpace. Yes, MySpace is still considered a social network.
FriendFeed, woo-hoo!
FriendFeed. I still use FriendFeed.
Oh boy.
There's tons of social networks out there, and the big question that people ask is, what should I use? And especially, what should I use for what? And there was this nice infographic that was posted up on logiclounge.com kind of helping people in the right direction of who uses it and what should you use it for. And I kind of just want to scroll down the list here and talk about each of the social networks and basically what they're good for, starting off with Facebook. And you guys can throw in your opinions there, but I personally think that Facebook is really for connecting with your friends or close people rather than the public. And I don't know if you guys agree on that at all, because I know there's Facebook pages as well.
That's a loaded statement, Creighton. But continue.
I think that Facebook is for exactly that. I use it to connect with friends and family.
Exactly.
Privacy is a myth on Facebook, but go ahead, Creighton.
I mean,
privacy is a myth anywhere online.
Privacy is a myth on the internet.
There is no privacy on the internet.
The facade of privacy is played very well on Facebook, but it's just that, a facade.
They do force you to use your real name, to be fair.
Yes, it's done well on Facebook in privacy concerns, even though anything you can post up on the internet can become public. They've done well by protecting your data, protecting you as a person from being out there in the public if you don't want to be out there in the public. So I think, Facebook, personal Facebooks can be used for friends, connecting with friends and family and stuff like that, and keeping connected with them. I don't see it more as a public social network. And I know that there's Facebook pages, but I think for that too, Facebook pages is more of a private thing, because I think Facebook is a one-sided conversation, especially talking with Facebook pages, because you can post up a status update to your Facebook page. Sure, you can have comments, but they're not in line, and you can't keep track of them easy. So it's really a one-sided conversation, I think, on Facebook.
Yeah, definitely.
To go back to our kind of last article, I'm not a fan of the way that Facebook selects on the timeline on what they think is the top post. So that's for me.
Yeah, definitely. Their algorithms, every business will have algorithms that serve their interests, and Facebook has figured out a way to serve you up things that they think will keep you engaged, keep you looking at their ads, because really that's what it comes down to for them, is making money off of targeted ads, and that's going to be the future for them, is ads, ads, ads. So whatever algorithm they need to keep you addicted and clicking is what you will see on Facebook. But yeah, I agree. You have some semblance of privacy on there. Yeah.
And then moving over to Twitter, I consider Twitter basically a public group text message is what I see Twitter as, because it's 140 characters, and you can talk to people, but you can talk to them in only 140 characters. So I see it as a public text message. And it's meant to be public and sort of one-sided. I mean, you can have conversations, but for people who may be following you, it could be a little annoying.
Yep, absolutely.
So
Yeah, a private Twitter feed makes no sense on Twitter, so it's absolutely a public service.
Exactly.
I do have to say that I recently have been using Twitter a lot more for networking and not just business branding, but personal networking. I've been working with a group called Pittsburgh Tweet Up to organize events, and that's been something that has worked very well for me to meet other people. But I'd always been meeting people on Twitter, because it's not like you read everything that someone posts. So
it's more for that instant sort of feedback and updates. Moving on, LinkedIn.
Service.
Yep, LinkedIn, great for business, great for finding a job. LinkedIn is more a professional profile, in my opinion. You use it to find a job, to keep a professional online experience, especially for people who are if you're looking to get a job, I'm sure that's one of the first places people go and look, is they go look at LinkedIn. And speaking of LinkedIn, I got an email the other day from LinkedIn from this person. I had applied at a job somewhere, and I got a LinkedIn message from this person who works for the company that I applied for a job for, and she's like, oh, look at these other jobs. So it's more of a professional finding a job experience.
I talked to someone recently who said they landed a job within 3 days on LinkedIn of sending one message to one person. So it's gigantic for employment, guys. So definitely use LinkedIn if you're needing a job or want to do some professional networking.
I haven't really explored LinkedIn for jobs more, so maybe because I have a full-time job and I have several companies that I'm involved in, so I don't actively look in that, but I do use it for professional networking.
And that brings us to my favorite social media service, Google+. I love Google+. And
more than Facebook?
Yes.
Wow.
As said by Chris Pirillo, it's more like a social blogger, basically, because you can put out blog posts, you can connect with people, you can do stuff like Google Plus Hangouts, like we're doing right now. People who are listening to the audio podcast, we do this via Google Plus Hangout that gets streamed out, so we can have visual conversations, we can have circles of people. It's more of a public atmosphere. And I think that's what Google is trying for, having a public presence, basically. they're still growing, but I think it's a very public atmosphere, especially online.
Absolutely. I use Google Plus exclusively for all of my team meetings, whether it's with the Geeks Riot team, the JailbreakCon team, or whoever else. Logic Lounge. Google Plus is my go-to for Hangouts for that. I used to pay for Skype Premium, which wasn't working out too well, and I was paying. But with Hangouts, you can have up to, what is it now, 10 people or
10.
more?
10 people in a Google Plus Hangout.
I mean, and you can make it private, which is even better. So your company or your team of entrepreneurs or whoever could be having private team meetings on here, discussing your business, sharing your screen, doing sketches, shared documents, all within Hangouts. So not really into using it as much for other purposes because I'm super busy and I just can't handle all of the stuff that goes on in there. It's a really busy place.
Social media overload.
Yeah.
Yes, I think Google Plus is a huge social media overload, but it's nice to go take a look at. It has a nice visual appeal. I think it works great for having
even
a
with the
public
new
purpose.
update.
Well, I'm not fond of the layout, but
Work in
like
progress.
anything new though, I'm getting used to it.
Always under construction.
Yeah, work in progress.
Like I said last week, Google is perpetual beta.
I don't know. Well, that's true. I don't know what I use Google Plus for. I guess I stop in by here and participate in Hangouts, and that's about all I use it for at this point. I post on it occasionally. There's no posting API, so nothing pushes there, which is horrible.
Yep. That's still
But
coming
that
though.
keeps clutter away.
They're still working on it, and they've already released one part of Google Plus API for at least reading data, and I think that posting API will be coming soon. And I think that wraps that up for the tech news this week. We're going a little bit over our time, but I think it was a good conversation to go over our time. So for one last time, let's go around the table and let's have, you guys can promote your links and tell us where we can find you online and what your businesses are. So Reza, let's start with you.
Well, I am the CEO of GeeksRiot.com. We are a geeky apparel company. And you can also find me on Twitter at @rmalieri. I'm also a team member on JailbreakCon, which is jailbreakcon.com. We're holding a conference on September 28th in San Francisco where you can come and listen to the world's top names in jailbreaking and workshops and everything else. But yeah, find me on Geeks Riot. You can find me on Twitter or just shoot me an email, reza@geeksriot.com.
And speaking of Geeks Riot, I have a coupon code for anybody who's listening. I haven't kind of worked into the podcast yet, but I do want to mention it. We do have a coupon code for Geeks Riot too, Logic15, LOGIC15. If you use that coupon at checkout, you get 15% off your purchase. And they have some great geeky apparel. I have a couple shirts from them, and I love it, so you guys should check it out. Will, where can we find you?
Everywhere. I am Will Reynolds Young. You can find me on Twitter at the eBay Kid. That's with a 1. You can easily find all my social media links at wrry.info. I obviously work with you, Creighton, on Logic Lounge. I am the CEO and founder of Worry Free LLC, which is the owner of Worry Free Skincare, and there is the code LOGIC to save 10% off there as well.
Great. And, of course, you guys can follow me at logiclounge.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Creighton. You can follow me on Facebook at Creighton Miller. Just search Creighton there. You'll find my public profile. You can always circle me on Google Plus as well. I'm the only Creighton Miller there. Be sure to subscribe to me on YouTube. Hopefully you guys, if you're watching this video feed, you're watching this on the YouTube channel. So go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. It lets us know that you're liking what we do and kind of keeps us going, and it gives us an idea of what you like and what you don't like. And I think that wraps it up for another Tech Theory Live podcast. You can view all of our archives of our Tech Theory Live on iTunes. Just search Tech Theory Live or techtheorylive.com. And for another episode, we'll see you guys next Saturday for another episode. So until then, we'll see you guys later.